We begin very softly, as though settling into a chair beneath an olive tree, the air warm and fragrant, the Aegean breathing a low, steady hymn beyond the leaves. Tonight you are invited to drift through an entire civilization, not in a hurried lecture but in a gentle stroll through stone corridors, sunlit courtyards, market stalls, and salt-bright harbors. Our subject is the Minoan world, an island-centered civilization that flourishes on Crete and nearby isles, roughly between the 3rd and 2nd millennia BCE. We approach it like attentive listeners in a quiet lecture hall, with calm attention and an acceptance that the past is both richly detailed and sometimes quietly mysterious. The Minoans are named after the legendary King Minos, a figure of myth remembered by later Greeks and woven into stories of labyrinths and bulls. But when we speak historically of the Minoans, we speak of people who build complex palaces, paint vivid frescoes, weave textiles, trim jars with graceful shapes, and travel by sea to exchange goods and ideas. Their world feels immediate in our minds because of the things they leave behind: pottery, tools, linear signs, and the buildings whose foundations and fragments still rest in Crete's soil. As we drift through the centuries, we will move from the island's earliest villages to the grandeur of palaces, from everyday meals to international trade, from religious ritual to the faint shadows of political change. I will use clear, accessible language and explain terms as they appear. When I say palace, I mean a central complex of rooms, storage magazines, courtyards, and administrative spaces, a place that is at once political center, economic hub, and ceremonial stage. When we meet the word fresco, I mean wall paintings executed on wet plaster, colored with mineral pigments that catch the Cretan light. When we encounter linear A or linear B, I will pause to explain that these names refer to writing systems found on clay tablets. One still undeciphered, one later understood, each offering clues about record-keeping and communication. Tonight's narrative proceeds in gentle, chronological steps. We begin with origins, the gradual growth of island communities, their early farming and seafaring. We then move to the age of palaces, where architecture and craft reach a delicate refinement. We trace everyday life, what people eat, how they dress, the rhythms of a year marked by harvests and festivals, and the spiritual life expressed in figurines and ritual spaces. We imagine Minoan harbors, boats slipping through turquoise water, amphorae stacked like quiet sentinels on decks. We consider the Minoans' relationships with neighboring societies, Egypt, the Near East, and mainland Greece, and we explore how ideas and commodities move along maritime highways. Finally, we reflect on endings and legacies, how the Minoan world changes, how parts of it persist into later cultures, and how modern study continues to piece together their story. My voice remains tranquil and scholarly, like a gentle professor speaking just above a whisper. The language is precise but not austere. Descriptive passages will place you beside a potter at his wheel, in a courtyard where children chase one another, and on a terrace smelling of pine resin and baked bread. Explanations will be short and clear, designed to inform without jolting the restful mood. After each section, we linger in reflective passages, soft invitations to breathe, imagine, and let the mind ease into sleep. As we drift through the centuries, allow the steady progression to guide you. Early villages become towns. Towns accumulate craft specializations. Craft and trade support palaces with storerooms and scribal activity. Palaces touch neighboring lands through exchange and diplomacy. Occasionally we slow to examine a single object, a seal stone carved with a scene, a painted jar that safeguarded oil, a fragment of a wall painting showing graceful dancers, and in that quiet focus we recover the texture of daily life. These pauses are restful, like stopping at a window to observe waves catching morning sun. I will also be attentive to uncertainty. Archaeology often offers fragments and probabilities rather than fixed stories. When scholars debate meanings, whether certain images represent gods, rituals, or something else, we will present the mainstream interpretations calmly, and note where matters remain open. That measured approach is part of the scholarly rhythm, to state confidently what we can, and to hold gently what we cannot be sure of. Tonight the narrative is chronological and soothing. We begin at midnight with an introduction and slowly unfold into 7 chapters that guide us through time and space, origins and early communities, the rise of palaces and artistry, daily life and ritual, trade and seafaring connections, art, architecture and urban organization, later transformations and crises, and finally, legacy and reflection. Each chapter includes gentle timestamps and concludes with a short reflective passage intended to ease the mind towards sleep. Now breathe in slowly as if inhaling the distant sea, and as you exhale, let thoughts of the present soften. With the map of centuries gently before us, we step into the first chapter, toward the earliest houses and the long, patient work of becoming a civilization. As the stars fade over the ancient Aegean, we turn our gaze to Crete, the long island lying like a sleeping creature between the blue waters of the Mediterranean and the darker depths of the Libyan Sea. Its mountains rise softly from the horizon, crowned with mist and silver light. The slopes are steep but generous, giving birth to springs that feed fertile valleys. Here, before the age of kings or palaces, small communities take root, quiet clusters of houses surrounded by fields of barley and groves of olives. The first Cretans, sometime around 7000 BCE, are farmers and herders who arrive from the eastern Mediterranean. They bring seeds, animals, and a knowledge of how to live gently on the land. Their homes are modest, low, round structures of stone and mud brick, roofed with timber and thatch. But within these early villages, the seeds of a future civilization already rest. They shape simple pottery, paint it with dark spirals, and polish it smooth with care. The clay turns to art, the everyday becomes a reflection of beauty. These early farmers raise goats, sheep, and pigs. They cultivate wheat and barley, lentils and peas, learning the rhythm of seasons on this island that is both isolated and connected. The sea, though vast, is never far. In the stillness of dawn, fishermen push their boats into the shallows, following the silver flicker of fish across the waves. The sea is their road and their protection, a natural moat that keeps larger powers away while inviting quiet exchange with neighboring lands. By 4000 BCE, Crete hums with small but thriving settlements. The people craft better tools, polished stone axes, obsidian blades imported from Melos, and delicate ornaments of bone and shell. Life remains simple, but their material world grows refined. A visitor might hear the sound of loom weights clinking as women weave linen and wool, or the steady tap of a craftsman shaping stone into a cup. Even then, beauty seems to matter deeply here. Every surface, no matter how functional, carries grace. As centuries drift like waves, the Cretans learn to work with metals. Copper arrives from Cyprus and the mainland, traded for oil, wool, and crafted goods. The island's communities expand, their houses clustering on hillsides near springs and fertile soil. The earliest centers, places like Knossos, Malea, and Phaistos, begin as little more than villages. Yet their locations are strategic, near plains that yield grain, near routes that connect to the sea. Imagine standing in one of these early villages at twilight. The air smells faintly of earth and smoke. A woman kneels to grind grain on a stone slab, her hands moving in steady rhythm. Children chase one another through narrow lanes, their laughter mingling with the sound of goats calling from pens. From somewhere comes the faint clang of metal, a smith testing a new copper blade. The people here know the weight of seasons, the patience of planting, the comfort of shared meals. Life is ordered by the sun and the hearth. We call this era the Early Bronze Age, roughly between 3000 and 2000 BCE. Across the wider Aegean, other societies begin to rise, on the mainland, the Cycladic Islands, and along the coasts of Anatolia. But Crete remains distinct. It is both apart and engaged, developing its own styles of pottery, its own artistic rhythms. In the valleys, settlements grow larger, their homes built with dressed stone and sometimes grouped around central courts. The social structure seems to be changing. Some households gather more resources, perhaps serving as centers of exchange or local authority. Archaeologists uncover large communal storage jars, suggesting that food surpluses are being collected and redistributed. This may be the first whisper of organized administration, the earliest pulse of what will later become palace bureaucracy. But for now, life still feels local, shaped by kinship and craft. The land itself shapes the Minoan character. Crete's geography is a mosaic, mountains, plateaus, gorges, and coastal plains. No single region dominates for long. To cross from north to south requires climbing steep ridges and descending into valleys where rivers carve stone. This fragmentation encourages independence and diversity. Each region develops slightly different pottery, tools, and burial customs. Yet shared motifs, spirals, waves, flowers, and sacred horns, hint at a common imagination. Death too is treated with care. The dead are buried in communal tombs, often reused for generations. Bones are sometimes gathered and placed together, suggesting reverence for ancestors and continuity of the living and the dead. Offerings of pottery, figurines, and jewelry accompany the departed, as if to ease the journey beyond. These quiet gestures of remembrance reveal an early sense of spirituality, a belief that life continues in another realm, woven into the same rhythm that governs the sea and the sky. By around 2500 BCE, trade expands noticeably. Cretan ships, likely made of cedar or pine, ride low in the water, their sails stitched from linen. They carry copper ingots, fine pottery, and textiles toward Egypt and the Levant, returning with gold, ivory, and exotic stones. On board, sailors chart the stars to navigate. Their voyages are the first threads of a maritime network that will soon make Crete the heart of the Aegean. We do not know their names or their songs, but their legacy endures in the objects they leave behind. In places like Machlos and Phaistos, archaeologists find workshops filled with tools, stone polishers, metal tongs, clay molds, and heaps of raw materials. These were centers of creativity, humming with the quiet industry of artisans who understood both craft and commerce. Slowly, these scattered workshops and villages begin to coalesce into something new. Around 2000 BCE, a transformation unfolds. Settlements at Knossos, Malea, and Phaistos grow into complex centers with paved courtyards, storage rooms, stairways, and drainage systems. This marks the beginning of the proto-palatial or Old Palace period, the dawn of the Minoan palaces. But even before the palaces rise, the groundwork is laid by centuries of peace, prosperity, and innovation. The Cretans seem to live in balance with their land, their architecture blending with the contours of hills, their art echoing natural forms. Unlike later fortresses of Mycenae, these early structures have no defensive walls. It suggests a world confident in its security, perhaps protected by the sea and by networks of mutual trade rather than warfare. In these early days, religion plays a quiet but pervasive role. Shrines appear in homes and caves, small figurines of women with raised arms, animals, and double axes, known as labyrinths, hint at rituals connected to fertility, nature, and renewal. Some caves are used for offerings, their walls glimmering with oil lamps, the air scented with resin and smoke. The people seem to perceive the divine not as distant gods upon a mountain but as living presences in the earth, trees, and animals. The island's rhythm remains steady and life-giving. In spring, fields of poppies and wild herbs color the landscape. Shepherds lead their flocks to high pastures, and bees hum through thyme-scented air. In summer, the sun hardens the earth and water becomes precious. Families store it in clay jars kept cool in shadowed rooms. Autumn brings harvest, grain, olives, and grapes pressed into wine. Winter brings stories told beside the hearth, tales that bind generations through memory. When night falls, the horizon glows with starlight reflected in the sea. A traveler sailing toward Crete might see tiny fires scattered across the shore, villages alive with gentle light, unaware that they are building one of the earliest complex civilizations in Europe. Their world is stable yet changing, simple yet full of potential. Archaeologists studying this period often speak of gradual evolution rather than sudden revolution. The Minoan civilization does not appear overnight. It grows patiently, shaped by climate, geography, and human creativity. The people learn to organize labor for building projects, to manage surplus food, to trade across distances, and to express meaning through art. By the dawn of the second millennium BCE, they possess both the material and intellectual foundation for what comes next, the age of palaces, writing, and international prestige. Let us pause here just before that threshold. Imagine standing at Knossos around 1900 BCE, when the first great complex begins to rise. The sound of chisels tapping stone echoes through the valley. Oxen haul timber up the slopes. Workers carry baskets of clay and plaster. Architects trace lines in the dust, planning corridors and storerooms. There is excitement in the air, a sense that something new, something magnificent, is being built. Below the construction site, the old village still hums with ordinary life. Potters shape vessels for oil and wine. Women spin flax into thread. Children run barefoot among olive trees. The smell of fresh plaster and wet clay mingles with sea air. Overhead, swallows circle in widening spirals, as if tracing the patterns that will soon decorate palace walls. And yet, even amid change, continuity persists. The same mountains stand guard. The same sea murmurs along the shore. The new palaces do not erase the old world. They gather it, amplify it, give it form in stone. The Minoans are not conquerors or colonizers of their own land. They are artists of space and order, building upon centuries of harmony between people and nature. It is here, in this union of tradition and innovation, that the Minoan spirit takes shape. Their civilization will soon achieve extraordinary balance. Between craft and ceremony, between faith and practicality, between individuality and communal life. Their palaces will not be fortresses but centers of openness, sunlit, colorful, filled with movement and life. As we close this first chapter, let your mind rest upon this image. Dawn over early Crete, soft light spilling over terraces, the sea calm and endless beyond. Somewhere, a mason wipes dust from his hands and looks out at the horizon. He cannot know that his work will last millennia, that one day people far away will whisper his civilization's name as they drift into sleep. The early Minoans leave us no written stories, no king's lists or conquests. But their stones, their pottery, their quiet grace speak with eloquence. They tell of people who loved beauty, valued skill, and found the sacred in the everyday. Breathe gently as the waves roll against the shore. The first chapter of their story comes to rest, like a tide pausing before it turns. Soon we will step into the age of palaces, into corridors of light, painted walls, and the rhythmic pulse of a civilization at its height. For now, rest in this early dawn of Crete, where humanity's creative spark first catches the island wind. As we move softly forward through time, the world of Crete transforms. The centuries after 2000 BCE bring something entirely new to the island's landscape, structures so grand and complex that they seem almost alive. These are the palaces, and their appearance marks the full flowering of the Minoan civilization. When morning light touches the hills above Knossos, it reveals terraces of stone rising from the earth like steps to heaven. Corridors branch in every direction. Walls are covered with white plaster. Stairways descend to cool, shadowed storage rooms. The air carries the faint scent of olive oil and fresh paint. This is not a fortress. It is an organism, a living architectural body, breathing with the rhythm of trade, ceremony, and administration. The Minoans build several such palaces, each unique yet related in form and spirit. The greatest stand at Knossos, Phaistos, Melia, and Zakros. These are not royal residences in the modern sense. They are administrative and ceremonial centers, the heartbeats of regional life. Around them, towns grow like rings around a tree. People bring goods for storage and distribution: oil, wine, grain, and wool. Scribes record transactions on clay tablets using a mysterious script called Linear A, still undeciphered today. To walk through Knossos in its prime, around 1700 BCE, is to enter a labyrinth of beauty and order. The word labyrinth itself may come from labris, the double-axe symbol so common in Minoan art. But this labyrinth is not one of confusion. It is a design of harmony. Sunlight filters through open courts. Columns painted red and black taper elegantly downward, wider at the top than at the base, a reversal of later Greek style. Floors are paved with gypsum, polished to a quiet sheen. Everywhere, water flows through terracotta pipes, supplying baths and fountains. The Minoans are masters of drainage and design. The frescoes here are not war scenes or portraits of rulers. Instead, they show life in motion. Figures leaping over bulls, women gathering saffron, dolphins gliding across blue walls. Their colors are vivid, cobalt, ochre, white and soft red. The painters work quickly on wet plaster, embedding the pigment deep within the surface so that it endures for thousands of years. Through these paintings we glimpse not conquest but celebration. In the central courtyard of each palace, ceremonies take place beneath open sky. Musicians play lyres and flutes, dancers move in spirals, offerings are made to gods whose names we may never know. Archaeologists find altars and horns of consecration, carved stone symbols resembling the horns of a bull, which may represent divine power or fertility. The bull in particular is sacred here. Its strength and energy appear in art and myth alike. The famous bull-leaping fresco at Knossos shows young acrobats vaulting over the animal's back in a daring yet graceful ritual. Whether this act is literal or symbolic remains uncertain. Some scholars believe it was a sport, others see it as a religious rite, symbolizing the cycle of death and renewal. In either case, it reveals a culture that values movement, vitality, and communion with nature rather than domination over it. Everywhere within these palaces we find evidence of organization and care. Storage magazines hold giant pit hoy, enormous jars as tall as a person, used to keep oil, grain, and wine. Clay ceilings record inventories. Workshops hum with specialized production, weaving, metalworking, perfumery, and pottery. Artisans shape delicate vessels with long spouts, perfect for pouring oil in measured streams. The Minoans are not only skilled workers but also meticulous administrators. Imagine the palace as a living city within a city. In the mornings, scribes kneel in courtyards, impressing signs onto wet clay with reed styluses. The scent of beeswax and ink fills the air. Traders arrive from coastal towns, bringing amphorae and textiles. Women carry baskets of herbs for perfumers. Men roll in barrels of wine. Priests prepare for rituals, their robes embroidered with symbols of serpents and lilies. And yet, despite this complexity, there is an underlying tranquility to Minoan life. No massive walls or weapons are found here. The Minoans appear to value openness and exchange over defense and war. Their influence stretches across the Aegean not through conquest but through culture, through artistry, trade, and diplomacy. The sea remains their constant companion. From harbors at Amnisos and Palicastro, ships set sail across the Aegean. They bring Minoan goods, pottery, textiles, crafted jewelry, to the Cyclades, to mainland Greece, to Egypt and the Levant. In return they bring metals, ivory, papyrus and ideas. The palaces serve as both warehouses and customs houses, their records tracking the ebb and flow of this maritime economy. We know from Egyptian paintings that Minoan envoys once stood in foreign courts, bearing gifts of crafted stone vases and scented oils. They wear elegant garments, flounced skirts, patterned kilts, and belts that accentuate slim waists. Their hair is long and curled, their skin bronzed by the Cretan sun. They are ambassadors of a civilization both refined and confident. Let us pause to imagine daily life in the palace city of Knossos at dusk. The sun sets behind Mount Juctas, and the white plaster walls glow softly in golden light. The day's work slows. Scribes close their tablets in clay boxes, potters clean their wheels, priests light oil lamps in small shrines. The smell of burning resin drifts through corridors. Somewhere the sound of a flute rises, echoing gently through stone halls. A family gathers in a nearby home outside the palace walls. They share bread dipped in oil, cheese made from goat's milk and figs dried in the sun. Conversation flows easily, talk of trade, of weather, of upcoming festivals. The city feels safe, connected, thriving. Beyond Knossos, other palaces rise with their own character. Phaistos, perched on a broad plain in southern Crete, has sweeping views of farmland and distant hills. Its central court opens to the sky, surrounded by tiers of rooms and grand staircases. Malea, closer to the coast, serves as a maritime hub, its storerooms filled with amphorae ready for shipping. Farther east, Zakros stands near a natural harbor facing the wider world beyond the island. Each palace anchors its region, a node in a network of prosperity and shared culture. Archaeologists speak of the Pax Minoica, a period of peace that may have lasted for centuries. The absence of fortifications, the elegance of art, and the emphasis on trade suggest a world largely free of warfare. This peace allows culture to flourish. Artisans perfect their techniques. Architects refine their proportions. Religious expression becomes more symbolic and abstract. Minoan religion remains deeply tied to nature. Shrines are found not only in palaces but also in caves, mountaintops, and house sanctuaries. Figurines of women holding snakes, often called snake goddesses, appear in these spaces. Their raised arms and serene expressions suggest control over fertility and the cycles of life. Whether these figures represent a single goddess or many local spirits is uncertain, but they convey a profound reverence for the natural world. The Minoans seem to experience divinity in the blooming of flowers, in the rush of streams, in the renewal of the earth each spring. Their rituals involve processions, music, and offerings rather than rigid dogma. Religion, like art, is woven into daily existence. In this age, writing also becomes essential. The Minoans developed an elegant system of symbols used to record inventories and transactions. Though undeciphered, it represents one of the earliest administrative scripts in Europe. It speaks to a culture that values knowledge and order, a civilization where words, even when silent to us, once guided the flow of goods and the rhythm of governance. But beauty always comes with fragility. Around 1700 BCE, the first palaces suffer a mysterious destruction. Whether by earthquake, fire, or political upheaval, much is lost. Yet from ruin arises renewal. The Minoans rebuild with even greater splendor. The Neopalatial period or New Palace era begins, a golden age of refinement. The rebuilt Knossos dazzles with complexity, 4 stories high in some places, filled with light wells and balconies, decorated with frescoes showing lively scenes of nature. Dolphins swim across walls and private chambers. Griffins, mythical creatures with eagle heads and lion bodies, flank thrones and ceremonial rooms. Everywhere there is color and motion, harmony and grace. Technology advances too. Aqueducts bring fresh water to fountains. Clay pipes carry waste away discreetly, an early form of plumbing unmatched in much of the ancient world. The architects think of comfort and elegance together, creating spaces that breathe and flow like living organisms. Trade grows even wider during this golden age. Minoan pottery is found as far as Cyprus and the coast of Syria. Their designs, spirals, waves, marine creatures, reflect both artistry and symbolism. The octopus, wrapping its tentacles around a vessel, becomes a beloved motif, representing the union between humanity and sea. For a long while the system works beautifully. Palace and countryside, faith and trade, art and administration, each supports the other. The Minoan world reaches a level of sophistication rarely seen in prehistoric Europe. Let us linger again at twilight, near the great central court of Knossos. Torches flicker. Musicians strike chords on lyres. Dancers move in circles, their movements synchronized like waves. The queen, perhaps a high priestess, stands on a raised platform, her garments glittering with beads. The crowd below chants softly, offering thanks to gods who dwell in the wind and the mountain. In this moment the Minoan world seems eternal. Yet history, like the sea, always moves. Soon, forces beyond the island's control will shift the balance. But for now, in this chapter, we rest within their golden peace, the age of palaces radiant and serene. Close your eyes and picture those corridors. Painted dolphins swimming above plaster walls, light streaming through open courts, the scent of olive oil and fresh plaster mingling in the air. Imagine footsteps echoing down stone stairs, laughter carried by the breeze, and somewhere beyond, the sea murmuring against the shore. This is the height of Minoan civilization, elegant, peaceful, profoundly human. And as the night deepens, we leave them at their peak, their palaces glowing softly under starlight, unaware of what the centuries ahead will bring. As dawn glimmers once more across the ridges of Crete, we move from the grand spaces of the palaces into the quieter rhythms of daily life. The Minoan world, for all its beauty and complexity, is built upon the steady pulse of ordinary people, the farmers, potters, weavers, and sailors who sustain the island's prosperity. Their lives unfold beneath the same bright sky, their days marked by sunlight, labor, and community. We begin in the countryside. Terraces climb the hillsides, held in place by low stone walls. Fields of barley ripple in the wind, and olive trees stretch their silver-green branches toward the sea. The scent of wild herbs, thyme, sage, and rosemary, fills the air. Shepherds move with their flocks through the uplands, bells clinking softly around goats' necks. Agriculture forms the foundation of the Minoan economy. Grain, wine, and oil are the holy triad of sustenance and trade. The olive, especially, is sacred and practical, its fruit pressed for cooking, lighting, and anointing. In villages near the palaces, the houses cluster close together. Walls are built of stone and mud plaster. Roofs are flat, made from timber and reeds. Inside, rooms are small but functional. A hearth, a loom, a storage jar, and perhaps a shrine with a small figurine or a bowl for offerings. Women tend the household economy, spinning, weaving, preparing food, and caring for children, while men work in the fields or craft workshops. Yet in Minoan art, women also appear as central figures in ceremony and procession, suggesting a society that grants them visibility and spiritual importance. In workshops, artisans perfect their crafts. Potters shape vessels on fast spinning wheels, their fingers smoothing the clay into thin, elegant curves. The designs are alive with motion. Spirals like waves, octopuses curling around jars, lilies blooming across surfaces. The kamars ware of the Middle Minoan period is particularly delicate, thin-walled pottery painted in red, white, and orange patterns on a dark background. To hold one of these cups is to hold both art and function, a union of beauty and use that defines the Minoan aesthetic. Metal workers forge tools and ornaments from bronze, a mix of copper and tin. They hammer sheets into jewelry, cast blades, and engrave seal stones with miniature images, lions, bulls, ships, and divine symbols. These seals serve as personal signatures, pressed into clay to mark ownership or authenticity. Each one is unique, reflecting both artistry and individuality. The Minoan artist does not merely decorate but observes. Their art reveals an attentive eye to the world, the curve of a fish, the flutter of a bird's wings, the delicate posture of flowers bending in the breeze. Even their geometric patterns seem alive, echoing the rhythms of nature. Art is not confined to temples or palaces, it permeates daily life. A cup, a wall, a box, a robe, all become canvases for expression. Minoan clothing adds color to this vision. Men wear short kilts or loincloths, women wear flounced skirts and fitted bodices that leave the shoulders bare. Their garments are richly patterned, dyed with saffron and indigo. Hair is styled in curls or braids, often bound with ribbons or ornaments. The overall impression is one of elegance and vitality, a culture that delights in movement, form, and self-presentation. Festivals mark the rhythm of the year. Although the details of Minoan religion remain veiled, the evidence suggests a deep reverence for renewal and fertility. On certain days, people gather in palace courtyards or sacred peaks to offer food, drink, and music to the gods. Dancers move in circles to the beat of drums. Offerings of grain, honey, and wine are placed on altars. Bulls, sacred to the fertility god or goddess, may be paraded or symbolically honored. At Knossos and Phaistos, small shrines within the palaces hold sacred objects. Double axes, small figurines, and vessels for libations. The double axe, the labyrinth, is among the most enduring Minoan symbols. It may represent thunder or divine power, or perhaps the balance between male and female forces. Whatever its meaning, it is always treated with reverence. Religion in Minoan life is both public and private. In rural shrines, people leave offerings in caves and mountaintop sanctuaries. On peaks such as Juktas and Petsofa, archaeologists have found clay figurines of humans and animals, suggesting that entire communities climb the mountains to connect with the divine. The landscape itself becomes sacred, mountains, trees, and stones serving as intermediaries between mortals and gods. Another central figure is the snake goddess, whose small statues are found in the palaces. She stands upright, arms raised, snakes coiling around her arms or emerging from her hands. She wears a layered skirt and open bodice, her expression calm and commanding. Scholars interpret her as a symbol of fertility, rebirth, and the household's protection. The snake, shedding its skin, embodies renewal. In her gaze we see both gentleness and strength. In Minoan religion there is no evidence of great temples or idols. Instead, the divine seems woven into life itself, in hearths, caves, gardens, and the seasons. Music, dance, and nature are acts of devotion. The Minoans express faith through beauty and rhythm rather than fear or conquest. Music and performance play essential roles. The lyre, flute, and drum accompany both ritual and leisure. Frescoes show dancers and musicians in flowing motion, often outdoors, surrounded by flowers and animals. There is harmony in their gestures, a unity between art, faith, and community. One of the most captivating frescoes, found at Akrotiri on the island of Thera, an outpost influenced by Minoan culture, shows young girls gathering saffron flowers. Their faces are serene, their hair adorned with ribbons. They collect the precious spice in baskets, a gesture of offering. It is a scene of devotion and labor intertwined, a mirror of the Minoan worldview that beauty and usefulness are never apart. Daily meals reflect both practicality and pleasure. Bread, cheese, olives, and wine form the staples. Fish and shellfish are abundant along the coasts. Meat is eaten during festivals. Herbs and honey flavor dishes, and ceramic cooking pots reveal sophisticated preparation methods. Eating is not merely sustenance but social and symbolic, a gathering that reaffirms community. Inside the palaces, feasting becomes an art. Large halls with benches and storage rooms suggest organized banquets, perhaps to celebrate seasonal cycles or honor visiting dignitaries. Pottery sets found in storerooms include cups, jugs, and bowls in coordinated styles, suggesting a love of aesthetic harmony even in dining. The Minoans also show compassion and curiosity in burial practices. Tombs vary, some are circular tholos tombs, others are rectangular chambers. Bodies are often placed in clay coffins called larnaques, painted with scenes of life and afterlife. Offerings of food, drink, and tools accompany the dead, signaling a belief in continuity beyond death. The imagery of spirals and waves often decorates these coffins, perhaps symbolizing the endless cycle of existence. Let us imagine for a moment walking through a Minoan town at dusk. The sky glows pale rose over the sea. Smoke rises from hearths, and the smell of bread drifts through narrow lanes. You hear laughter, the soft tread of sandals on stone, the distant bleat of goats returning home. Lamps flicker in windows. Inside, a woman places small offerings on a household shrine, a bowl of oil, a few grains of barley, a whispered prayer. Outside, neighbors greet each other in quiet voices. The air feels calm, timeless. This world is intimate, interconnected, and alive with art. The Minoans seem to see no strict boundary between sacred and ordinary. To build well, to sing, to weave a pattern, or to shape a pot, all are acts of harmony with the divine order. The artist and the farmer, the priestess and the sailor, each play a role in maintaining balance. From this perspective, Minoan art becomes more than decoration. It becomes philosophy. The flowing lines, natural motifs, and lack of rigid symmetry suggest an understanding of life as movement and change. The sea is their teacher. Waves are never still, and so the Minoans paint motion into everything. Archaeologists often note the absence of grim or violent imagery in Minoan art. Unlike many neighboring cultures, there are no scenes of battle, conquest, or punishment. Instead, we see dancing, harvesting, and communion with animals. Whether this reflects a peaceful society or simply artistic preference, it conveys a sense of joy and connection. The fresco known as the Prince of the Lilies, though partially reconstructed, captures this spirit. A youthful figure strides confidently, wearing a crown of lilies and feathers. His body is slender, his posture graceful. He seems less a ruler than an embodiment of vitality, a celebration of youth and nature. And then there is the La Parisienne, a small fresco fragment showing a woman with bright red lips and dark curls, her expression both serene and aware. She may be a priestess, or simply an elegant member of Minoan society. Her image reminds us that the Minoans saw beauty as sacred, a bridge between the human and divine. In every artifact we sense rhythm, spirals on pottery, curves of fresco lines, the circular dance of ritual. The civilization itself seems to move in a spiral, ever expanding, renewing, and returning to its center. As we drift toward the end of this chapter, imagine standing once more in a palace courtyard at night. Torches flicker. The air is warm and scented with wine and myrrh. Musicians play softly and dancers turn beneath the stars. The stone beneath your feet holds the memory of centuries, the weight of all who have walked here before. This, perhaps, is the heart of the Minoan world, the union of art and life, faith and joy, order and fluidity. A people who find the sacred in the natural, who build not for war but for harmony. Breathe gently as the waves outside Knossos whisper their eternal song. Let the imagery settle, the painted walls, the graceful dancers, the flickering lamps. The Minoans rest now, their world alive in color and rhythm within our minds. The next chapter will carry us outward, beyond Crete's shores, to the open sea where Minoan ships glide like shadows across moonlit waters, carrying the island's spirit to distant lands. The dawn light spills once more across the coast of Crete, and the sea glimmers like a sheet of glass stretching to the horizon. In that gentle shimmer, we begin to understand why the Minoans were called the masters of the sea. The Aegean, Ionian, and Eastern Mediterranean were not barriers for them, they were bridges. The ocean was not a frontier to fear but a living road connecting all corners of their world. From the harbors of Knossos, Phaistos, and Zakros, long ships set sail each season, their sails swelling with the island's warm winds. These vessels were masterpieces of wood and ingenuity. Sleek and narrow, with high curved prows carved in the shape of birds or bulls, they glided swiftly across the waves. Rowers sat in rhythmic lines, their oars dipping into the sea like synchronized wings. When the wind favored them, great square sails unfurled, shimmering like woven gold under the sun. The sea was the Minoans' lifeline and their mirror. Every journey, every trade route, every encounter across distant shores reflected the same harmony seen in their art. They moved across the waters with purpose and grace, bringing not only goods but ideas, symbols, and stories. Let us imagine one such voyage. It is early morning in the port of Knossos, near Phaistos. The air smells of salt and tar. Merchants call to one another as they load jars of olive oil, amphorae of wine, and baskets filled with figs and saffron. Bronze tools glint in the sun ready for trade. Clay seals are pressed into wet cords marking ownership. A captain stands at the prow, studying the horizon where the faint shadow of another island hovers like a promise. With a creak of timbers the ship pushes off. The rowers dip their oars and slowly the island begins to drift away behind them. Crete's mountains fade into a pale blue silhouette. The rhythmic slap of water against the hull becomes the heartbeat of the voyage. The Minoans traded with distant lands, Egypt, the Levant, Cyprus, Anatolia, and the Greek mainland. From Egypt they brought gold, papyrus, and exotic animals. From the east came copper, ivory, and fine linen. In return they offered olive oil, wine, pottery, and crafted goods whose beauty astonished all who saw them. The influence of their art spread widely. Minoan-style frescoes and pottery motifs appear across the Aegean and beyond, silent evidence of contact and admiration. At the Egyptian site of Avaris, frescoes with unmistakably Minoan themes, dolphins, bull leapers, and spiral patterns, decorate the walls. The pharaohs of the 18th dynasty likely welcomed these Cretan artisans into their courts, seeing in them kindred spirits of refinement and skill. Minoan ambassadors may have stood beneath the great pylons of Thebes, exchanging gifts and gestures of friendship beneath the blazing desert sun. The Minoans also shaped the world of the Aegean islands. On Thera, modern Santorini, Akrotiri flourished as a radiant outpost of Minoan influence, a city of multi-storied houses, frescoed walls, and paved streets. There, the same sense of color and movement blooms across every surface. Blue monkeys climb among red lilies, ships sail in procession through bright blue seas. Trade was more than commerce, it was cultural exchange. With every voyage, the Minoans carried fragments of their world, their faith in beauty, their taste for color, their sense of balance. and returned home with new stories, materials, and ideas. They were not conquerors, they were connectors. To rule the seas without armies or fortresses required something else: trust and diplomacy. Archaeologists find few signs of warfare or destruction in the Minoan heartland during their height. Their navy, if it existed as an organized force, was not for invasion but for protection of trade routes. The Minoan thalassocracy, their maritime dominance, was built on commerce and culture rather than conquest. The sea itself was sacred to them. Frescoes and seals show dolphins, octopuses, and fish rendered with affection and accuracy. The marine-style pottery of the late Minoan period is alive with underwater motion. It is as though the artists watched the ocean with love, understanding its grace and power. Perhaps they believed that life flowed from the sea, that the gods themselves rose from its depths. In their mythology, echoes of which later reached Greek stories, there were deities who embodied the ocean's moods: benevolent, mysterious, and vast. The sea was also a calendar. The Minoans measured time by the stars and tides, setting sail when winds were kind and returning before storms gathered. The constellations that guided them are the same ones we see tonight: Orion rising, the Pleiades shimmering faintly, the North Star steady over the dark waters. To sail by starlight was to feel part of a cosmic rhythm, as if each journey echoed the eternal dance of the heavens. Let us drift closer, hearing the murmur of sailors at night. A ship rests on calm water. Torches flicker along its deck. Someone hums a soft tune, an old hymn to the Lady of the Sea. The captain checks the stars, the oars lie still, and all is peaceful except for the faint whisper of waves against wood. The Minoans' maritime world also connected communities across Crete itself. The island's long coastline encouraged exchange between east and west, mountain and plain. Harbors like Machlos, Knossos, and Zakros became vibrant points of contact. Through these networks, not only goods but ideas flowed freely. New techniques in pottery, innovations in metallurgy, and the spread of religious symbols. One of the most fascinating aspects of Minoan seafaring is their apparent cooperation with other cultures. On the Greek mainland, the Mycenaeans learned from Minoan navigators, adopting their ship designs and trading routes. For centuries, the Minoans taught the Aegean how to move across the water. We can still sense this connection in the stories that later Greeks told. When they spoke of Minos, king of Crete, ruling the waves and sending ships to every shore, they were remembering the echo of a real era, an age when Crete's harbors shimmered with sails and her influence reached across the known world. Yet there is mystery in the Minoan Sea as well. Beneath its beauty lies fragility. A civilization built on the ocean's rhythm depends upon that rhythm's stability. And nature, though wondrous, is never still. Far to the north, beyond Crete, the island of Thera held a restless heart. Deep beneath its volcanic soil, fire and pressure built over centuries. The people of Akrotiri painted their walls and traded with Crete, unaware that their island sat upon a volcano preparing to awaken. Before that eruption, trade likely reached its zenith. Ships sailed constantly between Thera and Crete, carrying saffron, tin, and art. It was a golden web of exchange. But sometime around 1600 BCE, that harmony broke. The volcano erupted with a force beyond imagining, one of the greatest explosions in human history. Ash and pumice rained across the sea. Tidal waves swept outward, crashing upon the shores of Crete and the islands beyond. The sky darkened for weeks, perhaps months. Fields failed, harbors filled with debris, and the rhythm of life faltered. It is possible that this cataclysm struck at the heart of the Minoan maritime system. Ships were lost, ports damaged, trade routes disrupted. The sea that had been their ally became their destroyer. The once calm, glittering water turned gray and cold. Yet the Minoans endured for a time after this disaster. Their artistry continued, their palaces rebuilt, their spirit unbroken. They adapted, as all islanders must, to the changing moods of nature. But the world around them was shifting. New powers rose on the mainland. The Mycenaeans of Greece, strong and ambitious, heirs to Minoan trade but not their gentleness. Still, before that final turning, Minoan sailors continued to cross the waves. They reached as far as Cyprus and the Levant, maintaining fragile ties of commerce and friendship. They carried not only goods but hope, a determination to remain connected, to keep the sea as their path rather than their prison. At night, when storms passed, they would look toward the stars once more. Perhaps they whispered prayers to the great goddess, asking her to calm the waves, to let their children live in peace. The sea always listened, even if it did not always answer kindly. In this era of voyaging, we can feel a certain melancholy, an awareness that greatness is fleeting. The sea gives and the sea takes. Yet the memory of those journeys endures. Imagine now, drifting in a dream, that you stand at the edge of the harbor of Knossos. The air is thick with evening light. You see ships silhouetted against the horizon, their sails glowing like amber. The sound of waves laps softly against stone quays. Merchants call their farewells, children chase one another among the ropes and amphorae, and a priestess raises her hands to the fading sun. Far out to sea, the ships turn toward the open water. Their sails catch the last gold of day. You watch them until they fade into the twilight, until all that remains is the reflection of stars on the gentle surface of the sea. In that quiet, you sense the essence of Minoan life, the courage to trust the unknown, to move with the rhythm of tides, to live in harmony with the forces that shape the world. When future generations looked back upon Crete, they would remember her people not for their armies or conquests, but for their mastery of connection, for being the first to weave the Aegean into a single tapestry of culture, art, and trade. As you breathe slowly, imagine that endless sea once more. Hear the whisper of waves, the creak of wood, the call of distant gulls. The ships glide like shadows across the moonlit waters, carrying stories that will never die. The Minoans sleep now beneath the sand and stone of time, but their spirit still sails. In every ripple of the Aegean, in every gleam of morning light upon the water, their legacy endures, a quiet empire of grace forever born upon the sea. The sea, which once shimmered with the confident sails of Minoan ships, now holds a different stillness. Beneath that quiet surface lies the memory of catastrophe, an event so vast that it reshaped the very balance of the ancient world. This chapter unfolds gently but inevitably toward that moment. The eruption of Thera, the trembling of Crete, and the slow, dignified descent of the Minoan civilization from its golden height. For centuries, the Minoans lived in harmony with the rhythms of the earth and sea. They built their homes upon solid rock, terraced their fields, and worshipped the natural world that sustained them. Yet the same earth that gave them fertile soil also held immense power beneath its crust. Crete lies within a zone of restless geology, the meeting place of tectonic plates. Occasionally the ground would shiver, walls would crack, and pottery would fall. The people would rebuild as they always had. But around 1600 BCE, a neighboring island, Thera, now known as Santorini, began to rumble. At first, the signs were subtle: faint tremors, thin wisps of smoke from the volcanic caldera, animals growing restless. The people of Akrotiri, a thriving Minoan town upon Thera's southern shore, continued their daily lives. They painted their walls with joy and delicacy, creating frescoes of lilies, dolphins, and parades of ships. They traded with Crete and filled their storerooms with grain and oil. They may have sensed the mountains growing unease, but perhaps they trusted that the world would remain steady as it always had. Then one day the balance shattered. The eruption of Thera was not a single blast but a sequence of violent outbursts. The volcano roared, sending ash and fire high into the atmosphere. The sound would have been like thunder drawn out endlessly, a low, continuous growl that rolled across the sea. Tremors shook the Aegean. Ash fell in soft, gray snow upon distant islands. Those on Crete would have seen the dark cloud rise like a towering pillar, sunlight dimming into an unnatural twilight. As the eruption reached its climax, the island of Thera tore itself apart. Whole sections of land collapsed into the sea. The air filled with burning pumice and choking dust. Then came the waves. The explosion displaced vast quantities of water, generating tsunamis that surged outward in all directions. When those waves reached Crete, they struck its northern shores with terrifying force. Harbors were shattered. Ships were flung inland, dashed upon rocks and walls. The coastal towns of Amnisos and Malea may have been heavily damaged or destroyed. The elegant palaces of Knossos and Phaistos were built upon higher ground, and they survived the immediate flood, but their world had changed. The ash that drifted across the Aegean darkened skies for months, perhaps even years. Crops failed. Trade routes collapsed. The delicate rhythm of exchange that had sustained the Minoans for centuries fell silent. And yet, like all resilient peoples, they endured. The Minoans rebuilt. The palaces rose again, this time with even grander halls and more intricate frescoes. Archaeologists call this period the late Minoan era, an age both of recovery and refinement. The ruins of earlier disasters were incorporated into new structures, as if to remind themselves that beauty could grow even from ruin. Knossos especially became more magnificent than ever. Its storerooms filled once more with amphorae of oil, its workshops hummed with artisans shaping ivory, faience and bronze. The great central courtyard echoed with festivals and bull-leaping games. The palace seemed to proclaim that Crete still ruled the sea, that the island's heart had not been broken. But beneath that renewal lay unease. The world outside Crete had changed. The eruption had not only caused physical damage, it had disrupted the network of trust and communication that sustained Minoan trade. Egypt faced its own transitions. Anatolia saw rising powers, and to the north on the Greek mainland the Mycenaeans were growing strong. They were cousins of the Minoans, less graceful perhaps but ambitious, disciplined and martial. They admired the art of Crete and sought to imitate it. They learned Minoan shipbuilding, adopted Minoan symbols, and used a form of writing derived from the Minoan script, which we now call Linear B. In the century following the Thera eruption, Mycenaean influence spread like a tide across the Aegean. Their fortified palaces at Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos grew in wealth and confidence. They began to sail the same trade routes that once belonged to Crete. Some scholars believe that the Mycenaeans were invited to help restore stability after the eruption, perhaps as partners. Others believe they came as conquerors, taking advantage of Crete's weakened state. The truth, as often in archaeology, may lie somewhere in between. At Knossos, tablets written in Linear B, the early form of Greek, suggest that by around 1450 BCE, Mycenaean administrators had taken control of palace management. The language of the records changed, but the architectural and artistic traditions remained strikingly Minoan. It was as if the torch of leadership had passed quietly, without complete destruction but with a profound shift of identity. Still, traces of conflict appear in the archaeological record. Several Cretan palaces, including those at Zakros and Phaistos, were destroyed by fire around this time. The reasons are uncertain, perhaps internal revolt, invasion or natural disaster compounded by human tension. Whatever the cause, the centralized network of palatial administration that once unified the island began to fragment. Even so, daily life continued. Farmers still tended the terraced fields, shepherds still guided flocks through the hills, and potters still shaped clay upon their wheels. The beauty of Minoan art did not vanish overnight. Frescoes continued to depict the fluid, joyful world that the Minoans loved. Women gathering flowers, dolphins leaping through waves, priests performing rites beneath sacred horns. Yet there is, in these final works, a subtle melancholy, as though the artists felt the fading of something precious. The palaces, once bustling with scribes and courtiers, grew quieter. Administrative records suggest reduced trade and fewer luxury goods. The ships that had once filled the harbors of Crete became fewer each year. The island that had once ruled the seas now turned inward, tending to its own survival. By the time we reached 1200 BCE, the wider world of the Bronze Age was collapsing. The same era that saw the fall of the Hittite Empire and the turmoil in Egypt also witnessed the final decline of Crete's grandeur. Earthquakes, invasions, and shifting economies combined to end what centuries of natural beauty and artistry had sustained. Yet the spirit of the Minoans never vanished. Their symbols, the double axe, the spiral, the sacred bull, continued to echo in Greek mythology and religious imagery. Their architectural innovations influenced later builders. Their reverence for nature, balance, and color left deep marks upon the artistic conscience of the Aegean. As we drift through this darker chapter, let us pause and imagine the island at twilight in those final centuries. The palaces stand in partial ruin, their frescoes fading but still glowing faintly beneath the dust. The air carries the scent of sea salt and wild thyme. Somewhere in the distance, a shepherd's flute echoes. The world has changed but life persists. An old priestess walks through the courtyard of Knossos, her steps slow and careful upon cracked stones. She pauses before a fresco showing dolphins in mid-leap, their curved forms vibrant even in decay. She touches the wall lightly as though greeting old friends. Around her, ivy begins to climb the walls, and the hum of insects fills the stillness. The palace is not dead, it is dreaming. And so, Crete dreams through the centuries. Beneath its soil lie the remains of that magnificent civilization, sleeping like embers beneath ash. In later ages, Greek travelers will wander among the ruins and tell stories of Minos, of labyrinths, of monsters, of heroes. They will remember the echoes of a people who built beauty out of balance and harmony. The Thera eruption, though catastrophic, becomes more than a geological event. It becomes a symbol of change, of how nature and time shape the destiny of humankind. Civilizations, like volcanoes, rise from deep forces and eventually yield to them. Yet what survives is the quiet glow of memory. As night deepens, imagine standing once more by the Cretan shore. The sea is calm again, silvered by moonlight. Waves whisper against the stones as they have done for thousands of years. In that sound lives the faint pulse of the Minoans, a rhythm that never fully fades. They were not defeated so much as absorbed, their gifts carried forward by those who followed. The Greeks who built temples and wrote epics inherited their love of beauty and balance. The artisans who painted vases and carved marble remembered their grace. The story of the Minoans became a seed within Western civilization itself. Now, as you breathe softly, let that thought settle. Nothing beautiful is ever truly lost. It may change form, drift across time like a fragment of fresco or a shard of pottery, but it continues to speak. The Minoan world, though gone, still murmurs beneath the modern one, through myth, art, and the quiet sea. And as we drift onward to the final chapter, the island sleeps once more under starlight, her ruins dreaming of the songs once sung upon her shores. The fire has cooled, the waves have calmed, and all is peace again. The night over Crete is deep and silent now. The waves rise and fall against the ancient harbors that once glowed with the fire of Minoan lamps. The palaces lie in ruin, the frescoes faded, the courtyards empty. Yet even in their stillness, the stones whisper. They have not forgotten. And as we listen, quietly, patiently, we begin to hear the final story the Minoans left behind. Their legacy not of conquest but of continuity. Long after the palaces fell silent, the memory of their builders lingered in the minds of those who followed. The Mycenaeans who took control of Crete did not erase what came before. They absorbed it, carried it forward, and passed it down. The linear B tablets of Knossos, written in the earliest known form of Greek, are themselves proof of inheritance. The script evolved from the Minoan linear A, reshaped to record a new language but still written upon the same clay tablets, still impressed by the same styluses, still arranged upon the same palace shelves. This continuity tells a gentle truth, that even as one civilization fades, another arises upon its foundations, carrying fragments of its light. When the later Greeks told tales of Minos and his labyrinth, of Theseus and the Minotaur, they were remembering something older than myth. The labyrinth was not merely a maze, it was a memory of the complex palaces of Knossos, whose rooms and staircases wound like living puzzles through light and shadow. The Minotaur, half man and half bull, may have been a distorted echo of Minoan bull-leaping rituals, where young men and women vaulted over bulls as an act of grace and courage. In myth, memory finds metaphor, in metaphor, history endures. The Greeks looked back upon Crete as the cradle of a mysterious and golden age. In their imagination, the island was a realm of divine law and wisdom, ruled by Minos who, according to legend, received his laws directly from Zeus. This story, though mythic, carries the essence of truth, that the Minoans were among the first in Europe to develop complex systems of governance, record-keeping, and urban organization. As the centuries drifted onward, the physical remains of their world slept beneath layers of soil and time. The olive trees grew, the shepherds passed, and the ruins waited. It was not until the early 20th century that a British archaeologist, Sir Arthur Evans, began to uncover the palace at Knossos. What he found was astonishing: grand staircases, painted frescoes, enormous storerooms filled with jars, and the faint traces of an administrative system far older than classical Greece. Evans named the civilization Minoan, after the mythical king Minos, giving a modern voice to an ancient silence. His excavations revealed a people who were advanced, artistic, and deeply spiritual. The discoveries reshaped our understanding of European prehistory, proving that complex civilization had flourished on Crete long before Athens or Sparta were born. Though Evans' reconstructions were sometimes imaginative, his work opened the door to a new awareness: that history, even when buried, can dream beneath the earth, waiting for gentle hands to wake it. Today, the study of the Minoans continues with care and precision. Archaeologists use modern technologies, carbon dating, DNA analysis, and ground-penetrating radar, to piece together the lives of people who lived 4,000 years ago. Each discovery adds a thread to the tapestry: a fragment of pottery revealing trade connections, a seal stone showing mythic imagery, a tablet recording rations for temple workers. Bit by bit, the Minoans speak again, not through words, but through the language of artifacts and art. And what do they tell us? That beauty and order were central to their lives. That they found divinity in the cycles of nature. That they honored the sea, the earth, and the sacred feminine. That their world was not defined by war or empire, but by balance. To walk today through the restored corridors of Knossos is to feel the echo of those ancient ideals. The columns rise, painted in deep reds and blacks. The walls bloom with dolphins and lilies. The air smells of dust and rosemary. Sunlight spills through open courts just as it did thousands of years ago. And if you listen closely, you may almost hear the soft footfalls of those who once lived there: the potter, the dancer, the priestess, the child chasing a butterfly through the garden. In that moment, the line between past and present fades. The Minoans are not gone, they are simply quiet. Their influence reached far beyond their time. The Greek reverence for harmony and proportion, the architectural balance of temples, the lyricism of early poetry, all may trace subtle roots back to Crete. Even in modern times, artists and thinkers have drawn inspiration from Minoan art, its flowing lines and serene humanity. Pablo Picasso once admired the simplicity and motion of Minoan drawings. Archaeologists, architects, and dreamers alike find in Crete a reminder that civilization need not always be built on conquest. It can also be built on curiosity, craftsmanship, and care. As we near the end of our journey, let us reflect on the arc of the Minoan story. It begins with small villages rising from the Neolithic soil, where farmers plant olives and barley beside the sea. It grows into palaces and harbors that shine like jewels of trade and art. It trembles under the weight of natural disaster and foreign arrival. And finally, it settles into legend, into whispers beneath olive roots and waves. Every civilization has its rhythm, its dawn, its zenith, its twilight. The Minoans remind us that what matters most is not how long a culture endures, but how beautifully it lives while it thrives. Their art, their architecture, and their open-hearted connection to the sea speak of a people at peace with their world. Even their fall is graceful in memory, like a sunset over the Cretan hills, gold fading into violet, leaving the calm certainty of night. So as you lie back and listen, let your breathing slow to match the rhythm of the waves that still wash against Crete's ancient shores. Picture the island in moonlight, the terraces glowing pale, the cicadas quiet, the sea breathing softly. Somewhere beneath the earth, fragments of painted walls rest in silence. The gods of the Minoans, if they still wander, must walk gently here, watching over the ruins of a civilization that once danced upon the edge of the sea. The Minoans leave us a lesson whispered across time, that beauty, balance, and kindness toward the natural world are the true measures of greatness. Empires rise through strength and fade through time, but grace, the quiet harmony of life lived close to earth and sea, endures beyond destruction. As the final waves roll against the shore, imagine yourself standing upon that ancient coastline, the wind carrying faint echoes of flutes and laughter. The sea before you is infinite just as it was for them. And above, the same stars gleam, the same constellations that guided Minoan sailors home. The story has come full circle, from the first small settlements to the height of palatial splendor, from the trembling earth to the calm of remembrance. The Minoans sleep, but their song continues, carried forever on the soft winds of the Aegean. Now, as the last words fade, let your mind rest in that timeless rhythm, the rise and fall of waves, the hush of ancient halls, the whisper of eternity woven through the quiet palace of Crete. All is calm. All is peace. The story of the Minoans drifts gently into dream.